when you talk about like that off season, that I guess like that non-prep setting afterwards, you said it took you about a year to feel remotely like yourself. Um, what what would you say was the number one or two things that were the most dysregulated? What behaviors, what adaptive components were you like, oh, like okay, this is gonna take some work?
Hmm. Um, so I think it's this is strange because in my experience, it's the younger folks, younger, and then also the folks who maybe don't have as many preps under their belt that take the longest to recover. So I think a part of that was just the fact that, just how there's this switch for when you are going through your first fathom as a human being, and food is scarce. You go primal, right? There's a lot of other positive things too, because it makes those systems a little bit more resilient as well. So it's like my body just got better over time at getting those like lifeboats out and fixing things, right? The repeated bout effect, you could say, even though it's not happening super frequent, your body's smart, it remembers these things. So for me it was, I think initially, I think I took the macro course for way too long. So that's where I probably hurt myself. Like, I think counting your macros is great, and having the skill set to be able to hit, I don't know, 60 grams of fat every day, good. That's like a course you should take. I don't think it's where you should be the majority of your life. I think at a certain point we graduate beyond that. Like these days, I prep my athletes just with calories and protein, but there's a backbone of education there, and they make good decisions, right? So as freeing as it was to see the world, like from like in coding, like the matrix, to see these numbers, it also dysregulated a lot of things. I'm like, man, like I'm out here out eating, and it's like, how do I know that like this thing has what I think it says or what it says it has, right? Like, so it messed with me from that perspective. And then there was you work so hard to get peeled, especially those last few pounds. You'll always remember that, especially your first time breaking through that barrier. And to see that all go away, that was disheartening. It's like, okay, so you couldn't sell me on that at the time. That like, hey, now you're gonna like work hard on like making yourself look worse, but in a controlled way. So, okay, those two things, like some obsessive compulsive behaviors, body image issues, and then because I was really slow on the way out, and my body hadn't fully fixed a lot of the things that it had been meaning to get around, things that are way more important than muscle, hormones, immune function, organ tissue, things like that. It wasn't until I crossed that threshold, like where it felt safe, that I was like, oh, this is how my body progresses. Like, I remember it being this predictable. I completely forgot what that even felt like. And I remember I had to cross like the 185, and I competed like mid 150s at that point. So about 30 pounds later, finally, like my body felt safe enough to be like, yo, okay, we're good. You're you again. You're complete. And every year, I think part of it is just like my habits getting better, my systems. Like I only wreck myself as much as I have to get in shape. Whereas like the first time, you're just like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Um, so there's less things to fix. My body's better at fixing, and it hasn't. And not only that, but like shreds come and go, come and go. You're okay with that, like whatever, right? It's like I just want to get back to feeling good, but it takes a few preps. Last prep, I swear to you, like 2 weeks later, I was normal. Like I was waiting for that like bump of reality to hit me, because it goes, you think you're normal, and then it just hits you out of nowhere. You're like, no, no, you were crazy last week. This is normal. But I was finished cooking like 2, 3 weeks later. I was good as can be. So, but
Mm.
again, many moving parts. But that first one, it was 2 years there where I didn't enjoy bodybuilding, and I just kept doing it because of all the other positive things that it had done to me before. It's like all the previous highs. I'm like, no, I think there's still some high left in there. I think I just gotta wait. But for 2 years, yeah, it was like a bad marriage. Like me and bodybuilding, we didn't love each other.
Ah. Gosh, that really hits home for me. The first 2 years, I think, looking back, were very unnecessarily difficult. Like very, I was very much self-imposed. Um, and I remember like being on the way to my fourth show, and it wasn't even that lean. Looking back, I'm like, that's embarrassing how much of a little bitch I was being. Like, but I remember it was the starting point to the ending point, and the stress that I very much was resistant to managing. I kind of romanticized the idea of suffering. And, I can look back, I would say that was like a big page turn, because it was past that point. I was like, okay, we're not suffering just for the sake of suffering. Like that is senseless. It's immature, and there's a way to do it. And like if you're doing this simply so it looks, or it even, I mean, it felt like it was really hard, regardless of how low body fat it actually was. It wasn't that low, but it was like, well, your perception of it can be so powerful. And after those first four shows, I was like, yeah, there's got to be a better way. And I think it wasn't until the prep I did in 22, where I coached myself as a pro, where I was like, okay, we are going to take away some of these limits, these fixed ideas around like, here's how aggressive you can be out the gate. You can't take a diet break, you can't do untracked meals. It has to be a largely cardio based deficit. And I think when I approached it just with much more reason, and really caution and respect for like, hey, like this, you can get as lean as you need to get, you can get too lean. Um, but let's try to make this prep as, I won't even say optimal, as sensible. Let's make what you're doing that's very extreme, let's make it make sense. And let's, continue to use a logic based framework to make decisions rather than an emotion based framework, which I think for athletes who self coach, which it is becoming more popular to do, um, I think that's so important to be able to, continue to have some kind of North Star in guiding you for how you go about reaching that final destination.